Welcome to the Page Turnerz Podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
In today's episode, I'm talking to the Winds of Change series author, Rachel Weidner. Now, after spending some years in Germany with her husband who was serving in the military, she developed a love for travel and a passion for castles and gothic cathedrals. And now back in the US, that passion has served as an inspiration for her stories. Now we talk about her being a mum, how she finds time to write her stories, and we talk about the books that she's published and of course what she's got coming out next. All right, welcome Rachel. Thank you very much for coming today. Now I want to talk about your books, obviously, which is while you're here. So we'll talk about those, Awakening Dusk, and your other one as well, your Desert Stars. That's a short story, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, so we'll talk about that and of course what you've got coming up next. But what I'd like to talk about first is you as a writer and how you write, because you're a mom, is that right?
Yes, I have two, 7 and 6.
All right, so really simple, easy question is, how on earth do you find time to write? That's the question.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to
welcome.
be here.
Mm.
With 2, so I started writing with 2 under 2. It was very hectic. I remember I would nurse my daughter and put her to sleep, and I'd be typing ideas into my phone at the same time to get ready to go into the writing and everything. And Netflix definitely saved my life. I would put on How to Train Your Dragon for my 2-year-old boy, and honestly, that's why there are dragons in my books, because that show saved us. And then my husband is amazing. He was in the military at the time, so there would be times where he wasn't at home with us, but when he was, he's an incredible dad and an even better spouse. He's right over there.
Yeah,
So that way. Yeah, he always helps out and will give me time to hide from the children so that I can get writing and have that flow where it's uninterrupted. And I truly appreciate that. So yeah, I definitely think being a mom and as a stay-at-home mom, it definitely prolonged the process. I'm not one of those authors that can bang a book out in a year. It takes me a little bit longer, but it's worth the effort.
That's good. So you've got a little one on your lap and you're typing away on your phone. How on earth did you? Don't tell me you wrote an entire chapter on your phone, did you?
Oh no. Just the ideas. I would have inspiration and I would jot just a quick note down about something I wanted to write later.
Okay, that's good. So when you do sit down to write, sort of with some dedication, then how do you do it? Do you have an amount of time that you write towards, in a number of hours, a number of words or something like that? How do you write? What's your routine?
Yeah, so as far as the time goes, I feel like it changes every year as the kids get older, because it started with them both home and now they're both in school, so I can actually devote a few hours at a time. So for me, I really enjoy the word count and tracking that way.
Oh, you track it? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I like to go over it at the end of the day. That doesn't necessarily mean that I hit the mark every day or anything, but it just helps me feel even if it's just a paragraph, okay, that's what I did today. And I like this phrase. I didn't coin it, but it's working in the margins of motherhood. And okay. I just found even if it's only 15 minutes, you'd be surprised what you can do. I love the Pomodoro method of 20-minute timer, 5-minute break. Usually my breaks are longer than 5 minutes, but it just helps me stay on track. And also Spotify playlists with different music. I feel if I can just escape from everything else, have my music going, it's like a light switch that just turns it on.
Yeah. What sort of music do you listen to? Because I do something very similar, actually. I tried the Pomodoro method And I set it for, I think like you, 20 minutes with 10 minutes off, because apparently you have to get up and walk 250 steps according
Yeah.
to my Fitbit and all of that sort of stuff. So I thought, right, well, I'll just try that.
I'm not doing too much walking these days.
Of course, I meant to ask you about that. How is your knee? I'll come back to that. How is it?
Oh, you're fine.
It's good.
Oh, you're fine. It's doing pretty good. They actually took the stitches out yesterday, and that went better than I expected, because in my brain, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. I actually felt bad for what I put my characters through. No, it's going well.
As long as you're on the mend, that's the most important thing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So you're limping around for 250 steps then every hour. I'm trying to do it that way. Yeah, so I tried to do that, but I found that if I was in the middle of a paragraph or a scene that was really flowing and characters were talking and doing all of that, that kind of did go out the window. I didn't, the Pomodoro didn't work for me necessarily.
Yeah, I find that as well, where it's like if it makes it feel less overwhelming at the start for me. So I'm like, I only have to do it for 20 minutes, and then an hour will pass, and I'll be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same even when, and I'm sure people know who are listening, anybody who's been doing any time on the internet, an hour goes by in an instant, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Time. So music as well. You listen to music. What sort of music do you listen to?
So I am a huge Lord of the Rings film nerd. I love all the soundtracks. I also love Lindsay Sterling with the violin, and then Atten piano, and a very moody, very orchestra. I can't listen to songs with lyrics because I'll sing them and then I'll lose my train of thought.
And then you find you're typing the lyrics instead of the story.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't do that very well unless it's in like a different language where I don't comprehend what's being said. But what do you listen to?
Well, actually, it depends. It depends on what I'm writing. So, for example, the scene that I finished yesterday was kind of it was a really gory, gruesome kind of battle scene. So I was listening to Iron Maiden.
Really?
I like to have that kind of thumping rock music going on in the background. And, and it also kind of depends who's in the house, because this is my studio. This is where I write, but so I'm away from the main house. But if I have the music really loud, they can still hear it. I like to have it really loud. So I've got some earphones, then I just plug in the buds, and then I'm oblivious to what's going on around the world. But yeah, it really does depend. I've got all sorts. I've got country music, I have got rock music, I've got some soul music. I've got a whole playlist that's got
that's fun.
Yeah, it's amazing. And
so when I'm not writing, I listen to music like that and I jump around.
Oh wow. Yeah, and I find it just kind of gives me a little bit more focus on that particular scene. Again, depending what the scene's about. So if it's kind of like a romance scene, not that I write romance because I write sci-fi, so there's not very much in it. But you know what I'm saying? That kind of music that sort of goes with that sort of scene. That's kind of what I try to do.
Have you ever found it like affect your mood? So there's this song, I think it's called Gabby Song by Lindsay Sterling, that I would listen to over and over when I was writing like heartbreak scenes or if someone was dying. And then I found out later that was actually dedicated to a friend that she had lost. Right. So like I was feeling the grief through the music, but had no idea of the background of the song.
Wow. No is the short answer. But what I do, and I've just started to do this lately, actually, is I watch on YouTube gameplays. So I've just been watching playing Days Gone, and the last the Rad Brad, I think the guy's name is, and there's this other guy that I watched. But I find that gameplay, it being kind of that sort of computer generated sort of animation, it fits in really nicely with the film of my book that's going through my head.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I just literally started to do that the last week or so, and I find that but that will change. That's just the way it is. But yeah, I found it helps. So yeah, I'll stick with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a consequence, I'm a little bit chaotic.
I am too.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, are you a plotter or a pantser? But then I think you've probably just answered that.
Yeah, I definitely go in the middle of that. As with most things in life, I could never stick to one camp. But I think so. Joanna Penn from The Creative Penn described it as being a discovery writer. Yeah. And where like you're just discovering it along the way, because if you know everything beforehand, it's boring. And
Yeah.
I really relate to that. I don't know. I will have like an idea, like a vague impression, and I'll start writing. And sometimes I can get to like around 25,000 words. And that's when it starts to fall apart. And I'm like, okay, I need a plot. So I'll come up with a plot for the next portion. And then I'll start writing. And as I'm writing, just like new things that I didn't plan for will come to the surface. And you follow those trails and somehow you hope to get back to the plot.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
It's
find
fun.
that you go off on tangents and you discover things that you hadn't even thought of, hadn't even written down or had an
Yeah, I
idea of?
do. Yeah. And a lot of times it'll change the plot, like not necessarily the major points, but like some of the points leading up to like the climax or whatever are definitely not things that I had planned for.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm exactly the same. I think George R. R. Martin then calls it an architect as a planner, and a gardener as someone who's so as a
Oh, I
pantser.
really like that.
Yeah, so it's kind of organic and it grows, and because that is how it is for me. It's really strange. I was talking to, I think it was Beth Barani, and she was saying, I think it was Beth. She was saying that sometimes, the characters will just sit back and wait for her to catch up with them, really, and then
Yeah.
they'll lead her off in the general direction. I think it was Beth who said that, but I thought that was great, and that's exactly how and what happens to me sometimes. So it's a nice way to go in that respect. So I wanted to I want to change the subjects very slightly, in as much that now we know how you write, and you've got some books out already, so we'll talk about those in a moment. But you've done some book signings as well. Now, I haven't done that.
Oh, okay.
How did they come about? I know they were a few months ago now, weren't they? How did they come about?
Yeah. So one thing for indie authors, definitely reach out to a half price books if you're in America. I don't know if they have those in Europe, but
No.
they're like a secondhand bookstore, and they let me have the event at their place on their busiest day of the week, which was Saturday, for free. I didn't have to pay any commission fees or anything. They also promoted it on their website and other places for free. Again, it was such a blessing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was visiting family back home. There's no bookstores where I live. I live in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. And so I reached out to them and we coordinated via email, and then they let me use their space, and it was amazing. I was surprised by the turnout, but it's my hometown, so a lot of my readership is based in that area in
Sure.
Indiana. And I think if you have someone with you, it's easier. When you're by yourself, you can get in your own head or just
Yeah.
feel a
Yeah.
little bit more shy. So like my sister was with me and she was helping with transactions and like greeting people if I was in conversation with someone. And that really, really helped. I think by yourself, it's definitely a different story.
No, sure.
But it was about 2 hours. It was good.
Okay. I mean, so how many people came? Did you count?
So I had a lot of family turn up. I was kind of surprised. So I mean, that's probably around 20 or so, 25 people.
That's so nice, though. That's so,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, there were a couple people that I didn't know. So like of the family, like there was only about four people that were like new faces.
Yeah.
One of them was actually her birthday, and that was what she chose for her birthday present. It was so sweet.
Wow. Well, that's
Yeah.
really good. So did you write a special note in the book then?
Yeah, I love signing books. And one of the things that I do with my book is I always write "You matter" inside before I put my initials or whatever. And it's a phrase that one of the characters said, but it's especially important to me because during the process of writing my book, I actually lost my dad to suicide.
Okay.
So I try to have whatever I put in the book have some significance. And I actually had someone, it was that day at the signing, he worked at the store, but he bought my book. He came over and was like 5 minutes later and he was like, "Thank you so much. Like that just means so much to me." And
Yeah.
like in person, when you see that brings value to someone,
Yeah.
I could cry. It was just so special.
No, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned your sister. Has she done some illustrations for you? Did she do some drawings for you?
So I actually have three different artists in my family.
Oh,
It's
wow.
insane.
Can I
Yeah.
borrow
So
one?
my sister is an artist. If I wrote horror, she would definitely do the illustrations, but we're not quite in the same genre. So that the illustrations are actually done by my mother-in-law.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and then my sister-in-law is also an artist. It's phenomenal. I couldn't have it any better.
No, they're really good. And I mean, when you spoke to them about it, did they sort of come up with some ideas that complemented yours, or did you sort of say, "This is what I want. This is this is how I see my character, or whatever it was that you had illustrated. How did you communicate what you
So I
wanted?
kind of came up with like a list of ideas and gathered some like Pinterest references.
Okay.
And then she would start the sketch and we would have some back and forth going over it together. Um, I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but I'm probably a bit of a control freak. So there was some creative license, but I definitely had a lot of input. We worked really well together. I'm hoping that she can do the illustrations for book 2. She is in the process of moving though, so it's not set in stone, but I really enjoyed working with her, and bless her heart, she did all of it for free. Like,
Wow.
I
Nice.
know
Yeah.
it's unheard of.
Yeah. But I mean, as writers, we always have sort of a picture, an image, a movie
Yeah.
going on in our heads of the story that we're writing. So you kind of create pictures of what your characters kind of look like anyway. But what's really interesting, and I don't know if you agree, but some of the I don't want to say training, but some of the research that I've done about how to write, because anyone can write, but
Mhm.
writing a novel is a little bit different.
It is.
People say, the people that I've spoken to or listened to, Jerry Jenkins, for example, Stephen King, they don't give huge descriptions of characters, exactly what they look like. Let the reader, make up their own mind. Let the reader see the character for themselves. You kind of give them pointers. Do you do that in your books, or are you very detailed?
I definitely think it's a mixture. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to find an illustration to show you because she actually captured it better than I imagined it, but I don't remember the page number.
That's all right.
Um, yeah, I think so. I actually have complaints sometimes from alpha readers that I don't describe the characters enough.
Yeah.
So that's actually a struggle for me where like when I do put the description in, it's too late and the reader's already pictured something else.
Yeah.
So that's something I've had to work on with editing and bringing that closer to their introduction story. But I think for me, I have it playing it as a movie in my head, but I can never fully picture their face. It's really strange.
Yeah.
So that's always a little bit ambiguous for me. So yeah, I think I'll describe certain features, but it's definitely up for interpretation.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's more of an impression rather than a description.
That's it.
And that impression is really more to do with the character's demeanor, their attitude towards.
Yeah, their personalities come to us.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, listen, I suppose then we ought to talk about your books, really. So let's talk about Awakening Dusk first. So that's the first book in the Winds of Change series, isn't it? That one.
Correct. Yes.
And that's out right now.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about where people can get that at the end.
Okay.
But like mine, that's a goodly length book, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, yes. I feel bad. It's about 630 pages in the paperback. I think it's
Yeah.
500 ebook.
Mine's the same.
I know it's such a monstrous thing.
But I found that when I started, the story just kind of grew, and it didn't really stop. And I felt that if I'd stopped at a point where it was like 350 pages long, they were getting less than half the story. Now I know, some people say just cut it in half and have book 2, but it just felt to me like at that point the story was at the meat of it, and it
Yeah.
kind of leading into the
Like
sort
it
of.
didn't do it justice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Did you feel the same then when you were writing yours?
So I actually had a complaint from my editor. So I don't know if you've ever seen the meme where like the first half of the horse is like elegantly drawn and then like a 6-year-old finished it and it's just like a mess of the
Yeah, yeah,
I had
yeah.
a bit of that with my story. I was getting worried about the word count. And as I wrote, I was like very descriptive in the beginning, very visual of the setting. And then as it progressed, I was just like getting those like bare bones out in the plot. And I was getting worried about the page count. And I
Yeah.
didn't include as much description and like immersion in the story. And she was like, why are these chapters shorter?
Wow,
So
okay.
yeah,
That's
that was my developmental editor. And it was really good feedback.
Yeah.
So it went from like a 90,000 word document to 150,000 by the end because I just
Well,
wound up adding so much more.
but isn't that good though then? Because that says that the readers are going to want more from you, and if you're just giving them what they want, and that's really good. I think,
Yeah, I appreciated her feedback a lot. I think it helped enrich the whole story and give me confidence as a writer too. Like you want to know what I have to say, so I should include it.
absolutely. And I think a story is as long as the story should be.
Yeah,
it
I
is still
agree.
the end. So that's it. But you are writing a series, so this is the first book in the series.
Yes,
We'll
yes.
talk about the second one in a moment. But I did want to talk to you. I mean, you've got loads of characters in it, haven't you? I mean, on your
Oh,
website.
it's such an ensemble cast, and that was purely accidental. I love the Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship and like the Unlikely Allies. I was definitely influenced in writing this. And so it was like as I was going, more and more characters were just coming up to the page and I had to give them room if they demanded to be there. So
Did
it's,
any
it's
of
only a
them?
dual POV, but it's actually in the second one I expanded and it's actually multiple POV. So it still focuses on the two main characters, but the plot required some different positioning of the players. And
Yeah.
so there's actually some more perspectives that I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Did any of them, I was going to ask, did any of them grow into more to have to play more of a part in the book than sort of originally in mind?
Yeah, definitely. There's one character. Okay, so at the start of the book, there's one character who's not fully mentally with it. So she was such a fun character to write because her speech is broken. You don't understand what she's saying, but like she's spot on every time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like I like playing with the characters like that. She was really fun to write. But then there was another character that was introduced later, and her name's Bea. And I don't know, she's such an polar opposite to the main character that she's almost antagonistic and
Wow.
like the banter is just really fun, but yet
Mm.
she's not the villain. And in the second book she actually becomes a major player. I think I find her really interesting.
Oh, well, I think you've got to have that. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
written a character the idea was he was just going to be in a few scenes, and now all of a sudden he's a main character. That's happened
Mm-hmm.
quite often. I think it's nice to have that contrast between a character that is a polar opposite, but still not a
Mm-hmm.
main character, because it adds more weight to your main character, their feelings and what they do. I think that's a good thing to do. Absolutely.
I agree. If the characters are all the same, it's a bland story. Like there's nothing there to create controversy. But
Yeah.
it is fun. Some of the characters that maybe presented a little bit weaker in the first book because you just didn't know them as well have been the characters that I've chosen to write from their perspective in the second book. And
Sure.
I feel like it's making it stronger. I don't know. We'll see what readers think.
Well, yeah, this is it. And talking of which, do you have alpha readers, beta readers, arc readers, all of that? So do you go through that whole process?
Yeah, I have a little private email list of like alpha and beta readers, mostly friends and family.
Yes, they are. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic because probably 90% of them don't read fantasy. But it's been fun actually with Awakening Dusk as I was just starting out. I didn't really have a ton of people that I could reach out to that did read fantasy and be like, hey, can you give me your thoughts? But then as I was producing the short story, I actually wound up having more ARC readers than I did for my first book because they were readers who were following along or some new ones, and they were fantasy readers, and the feedback, it was so helpful. It changed
Yeah.
the ending of the story a bit.
It's amazing what they pick up on as well, isn't it? Little things that you think,
It
oh, if I'd have said that, foreshadowed that perhaps, a scene or
is.
two
Mhm.
ago, that could, but yeah, they're really helpful in that. And it's good that you have those. And a
I'm
lot of
super
people are,
grateful. I'm
yeah,
grateful for the family too, because like they're going out of their way to read this, especially since,
absolutely.
as you said, we write such big books.
Yeah, well, exactly. I was going to say, yeah, mine's the same. I mean, mine's not quite as long as it's 500 and something odd pages, but it's a commitment.
It
And
is. It
I'm
takes a
really
lot of
grateful.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really grateful that people were willing to spend the time. And I think because, we put so much time, and it doesn't, I mean, I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like work to me. I mean, none of this feels like work to me, if I'm honest.
Oh,
Let's face it, I'm just chatting to you like there's,
oh, it's fun. Yeah, we get to daydream and be paid for it.
yeah, exactly. So it's not like work, and writing doesn't feel like work. Although sometimes, and when we were saying earlier on about you tracking your word count and all that sort of, I did do that right at the very beginning, but I found lately, since just before Christmas, that I found it hard to sit and keep up with that sort of 1,000 to 1,500 words a day that I was doing prior to that. So, I kind of have to ask myself, is like, do I need to do that? Does it need to be that dedicated?
Mhm.
Part of me says yes, obviously, to get the work done. If you look at somebody like Stephen King, who I mentioned earlier, and Jerry
Oh
Jenkins, who I
yeah.
mentioned earlier, Stephen
I
King,
think Stephen King is like 2,000, isn't it?
he'll sit and he'll write 6
He's
pages
just
until
a
he's done.
beast.
Yeah, absolutely, so, but it obviously works.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know, um, so,
No,
anyway,
I was listening to a podcast yesterday and it had, I think his name is Jack Carr. He wrote the Terminal List that they
okay,
just produced on Amazon.
yeah.
And he was saying, like, you can't have writer's block because, like, a trucker doesn't get trucker's block. And I was like, man, that's brutal. You're calling us out. It was an interesting mindset to listen
Yeah,
to.
and I kind of agree with that. Sometimes, like yesterday, for example, I finished a scene and it was 600 words. That was all I needed to write to finish it, and I was kind of then done. I'd reached it in my mind. It was a mental stopping point, So I'd sort of right, okay, so, and that was just 600 words. And yet this morning I sat down and I wrote 1,200 words without
Oh,
too much.
wow.
So there's not, am I
I think word
disciplined?
counts are helpful, but sometimes they are like a hindrance. Like if you've just finished a scene, like that's a good amount of writing, in my opinion. And then you can feel like you didn't do enough. Also, do you ever find that tracking word count only helps when you're drafting? Like
Yeah.
I find it so tedious trying to figure out what progress I've made when I'm editing. Like it gets so bogged down because you're cutting words, you're adding words. You're like, I don't know what I've done today, but I've been sitting here for 4 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and then of course you're absolutely right. That's the other thing with word count as well. It's almost, you're almost in competition with what you did yesterday.
Yeah,
So
and it can be frustrating.
yeah, absolutely. Especially if the scene doesn't warrant 1,000 words. It may
Mhm.
not. And it feels like you've then perhaps got to get into the next one. I mean, there's some of the writers like Nick Snape. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast I did with Nick, but what he does is at the end of every scene or every chapter or the end of his writing time, he will leave it at the previous sentence at a point where he can immediately jump into the thoughts
Oh,
that he
that's
had.
interesting.
That's a really good idea. I thought, and I have
Mhm.
tried that. It does work. I did do it some time ago, but I admit it. I've not been very disciplined. I'll admit it.
It is hard. It's hard.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes it really is. Okay, so let's talk about then before we move on to your second book, you write fantasy. So one of your leading females, she's got magical tattoos.
Yes.
So without giving too much away, can you kind of sort of enlighten us a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think it's mentioned in like her introductory chapter, so I don't think it's spoilery. But yeah, she's part of a house. Her house is the House of Time. It's like a secret order, and she's a scholar and a warrior. But the amount of knowledge that she digests is like not something that she could memorize or keep. It's like too much for her capacity. So the tattoos are rewards for like passing certain tests, but they hold like magical storage. Like think of like a game when you get more storage for the things you're picking up.
I
It's
got
kind
you.
of like that. But
Ah,
they're magical storage so that she can retain more knowledge and learn more and continue to progress in her field of study.
wow. Where did you get that idea from? That's pretty good.
So honestly, it wasn't all me. It was some of my husband. He's a gamer. I'm not. But I wanted to include the tattoos. I wanted them to have a meaning. I wanted them to be magical, but I couldn't quite figure out how to fit all those pieces together. And he was like, what if it helps him with memory? And I was like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of brainstorming with my husband. He's so great because he's a fantasy reader. He honestly reads more than I do. Like he speed reads through everything and he's good to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Do you ever sort of compare? Compare's not the right word. Do you ever, the stuff that you read? Do you look at it as a reader or as a writer?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I used to read it as a reader, and
Yeah,
I would read a whole lot more books then.
yeah.
And then I heard of this thing called flagging, and it's actually supposed to be for editing, but you practice on someone else's book first. So you read through it and you highlight the things you love, or the passages that are written beautifully, or those that invoke certain emotions. And you don't mess with anything you don't like with your own book. Like you don't say, oh, this is trash or oh, this needs deleted. You're only pulling out the bits that you love. So at the end, like you see what's working,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can go back and actually start like the process of like getting into it. So I started flagging books that I was reading, and the next thing I know, I've got highlights everywhere. I have no clue how to annotate, but like I'm like highlighting like I'm like literally stopping to look up words that I know the meaning to just because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I know what you
So
mean. Yeah.
it definitely slows me down. So yeah, I definitely think I have a hard time turning off the editor brain, and it has made reading a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say, has it kind of ruined your enjoyment of
Depending on the
reading?
book.
Yeah,
Yeah, if the because there's certain writers that they're just so good, they're favorites, and no matter what, they pull you into the story, and that kind of falls away.
yeah,
But if it's like a new writer that I've never read any of their work, I do struggle more.
yeah. I do it with films as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can see it sometimes. You can tell what's going to happen next because if you look at it as a critical writer, you kind of know where the story is going, and it hasn't ruined things for me. I just have to mentally, switch it off in the back of my
Yeah.
head and just sit back and think, no, this is not work. I'm not doing it. But
I do like it though when you learn things.
yeah,
Like when you're like, oh, that was structured so beautifully, or that
yeah,
was foreshadowed perfectly.
yeah.
And even with like little innocuous bits that foreshadowed it, I think it's super fun to learn from them.
Absolutely. And then when that jumps out, you think, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You're like,
yeah,
oh,
that's
that's
really
why
good.
that was important. I didn't know at the time, but it stuck to my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a testament to good writing, I think. That's really good.
Mhm.
So let's talk about your second book then. So that's a short story, is that right?
Yes, yes. And it makes so many people mad in a good way.
Okay, I was going to say Desert Stars.
Yes.
So I think something that I read, you made your editor cry.
Oh, I did.
Ah, so
I
go
made a lot of people cry. I made myself cry.
on.
Yeah, it's definitely a tragedy, but there is hope interspersed through it. So it's not like one of those tragedies where you get out of it, you're just like, I can't function. Like life is horrid. But it doesn't do that to you. It's not going to derail you, but it definitely pulls at those heartstrings. I mean, it's the journey of a father trying to save his family against
Yeah,
insurmountable odds. Like
yeah.
it's gut wrenching.
Do you find that, I mean, I've spoken to people about this before, but do you find that when you're writing scenes, something that's particularly tragic, and you finish, you kind of have to sit back and go, oh, kind of take a breath
Yeah.
just to let it go, so to speak?
Yeah, or like an idea will come and I'll gasp and I'll be like, oh my goodness. And yeah, definitely having to sit back and it's almost like the ideas have to marinate, but then when you write it, like there's still a little bit more marinating going on, and you just like need a minute to digest what you've done to yourself.
Yeah, very definitely. And I'm exactly the same. Mine, of course, are more sort of battle, gore, and fighting scenes more than.
Oh, I love writing fight scenes. It's so entertaining. And yeah, in Desert Stars, the antagonists are Wyvern or Wyvern. So like there's a lot of fire and gore.
Yeah. Oh, and how long is that book? It's not particularly long.
No, I think it's under 10K words, but just under. I'm not exactly certain
So about
where I
sort
wound
of
up. I
30
think it's about
pages.
a 9,000 words, I think.
Okay, yeah, so that's what, about an hour, 30 pages, something like that.
Yeah, it's not too long. But
Wow.
I tried to make it really impactful with the conciseness of it.
Yeah. And earlier on, you mentioned editing, and you were talking about development and editors, etc., etc. Do you go through the full gamut of development, line editors, copy editors, proofreaders? Do you do all of that? Because there are a lot of.
If my budget allowed for it, I would absolutely do the full gamut.
Yeah, yeah,
Unfortunately, and I'm sure you experience this as well,
yeah,
when you write such monstrously sized books, it gets so expensive because
yeah,
it's per word. So for Awakening Dusk, I did a developmental edit because I figured if there are a few typos, that's less upsetting than if the plot has a gaping hole.
yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't
so I
agree
did a
more.
developmental edit, and then I did a ton of self-editing, of course, and then some beta reading, and then I did do a copy edit.
Right.
And then the proofing I did myself, not thoroughly enough because I had certain family members be like, oh, I found a typo here. Oh, I found one here. So it's not quite enough changes to count for a second edition, but I actually re-uploaded it and fixed all those mistakes. So future readers, you won't have to worry about that. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely, I feel like when you start off as a writer, you think I just have to write the book. And
Mm,
it's such a learning process,
yeah,
like learning the stages. Like I don't think I had fully learned how to edit until I took on book writing.
sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Because I used to be a blogger and I would write about motherhood and family and stuff. And like article editing is like nowhere near as comprehensive as book editing.
No, it's quite amazing, isn't it? I think people, when they pick up a book from, I don't know, a library or a bookstore, or even an ebook, or you buy something off of Amazon, they don't really, all this is the end product, isn't it? It's kind of
Yeah,
it's the iceberg, isn't it? I don't know if you've heard of that.
exactly.
All they see is the bit at the top of the book. They don't see the struggle, the stress, the editing, the time, the money, and all of that
Yes.
goes into it
Yeah, because
underneath.
I had the idea for the book in 2018. And
Wow.
then we were moving from Germany to New Jersey because my husband used to be in the Air Force. So I actually lived in Germany for 3 years. Honestly, that's why I write fantasy. You guys are so lucky with the history and the castles and the cathedrals and the places you can visit. It's so beautiful in Europe. And then
Yeah.
in America, like there's nothing. Anyway, so we were moving. So like writing got, suspended. And then I started drafting and I was done with the first draft on Mother's Day in 2019. So it was like a year and a half. And then I edited all the way up until publication in
Wow.
2022.
Yeah.
I feel like editing, I don't know, you can get lost in it.
But it takes the time, and I think really that's kind of where the story often comes together, isn't it? I think from the
Yes.
development edit, and then the line edit, all of a sudden the story comes together. The
Mhm.
prose is better. Did you find that there's a difference in your writing between your first book and this one in the way that in your style of writing?
Mm. So for the short story, it's about Shapethians or shapeshifters.
Yeah.
And they don't shapeshift into like other animals. They can shapeshift into the last person they killed.
Mhm.
So a little gruesome and like kind of take on that identity and
Yeah.
everything. So for that, and because they're exiled to the desert, with like the way I described things, I tried to keep it in that character's tone of voice.
Right.
So like I've made comparisons with similes like a sand snake or like something like that, so that it was related to their environment. Whereas with Awakening Dusk, I have a different range of characters, and like Liani, the elf who's the scholar, I mean, she's so learned, I can use whatever word I want.
Yeah.
And then with Raiden, he's an illiterate carpenter because the society doesn't allow humans to learn to read and write. So he has a very different perspective on things. So I think definitely the style changes with the characters.
Yeah.
And also as you grow as a writer.
Yeah, I was going to say technically, when you're writing the sentences, do you find it easy is perhaps not the right word, but easier to kind of follow the structure of a sentence or a paragraph? So easier to write technically because you've grown as a writer.
Maybe. I think my vocabulary is better. I think that's probably what's improved the most.
Well, that's amazing. But that's what happens.
Sentences, I don't know. That kind of comes to me pretty intuitively, so I don't think about it that much.
Oh, that's even better, isn't it? Really, because if it just comes out naturally, then that's got to be good. All right, so in Desert Stars, then, so it's 30 odd pages. You say about 9,000-10,000 words, about an hour to read. Did you find it? I mean, it's kind of a very tragic book that you said. Where did that idea come from, and did you find it hard to write?
That's a tough question. So I wrote it actually way back in 2020.
I did promise I wasn't going to ask you any tough questions, but
no, you're not. I wrote it back in 2020, so I don't know if some of the like pandemic turmoil was entering.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I think honestly, there's some family stuff going on, not with my immediate family. And a lot of times when I get like stressed out, it comes out in writing, and that's kind of therapeutic for me and how I process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I was just kind of getting some emotions out and just like processing, and then it wound up being this like truly heartbreaking story.
But your readers love it, obviously.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think in some ways the short story is better than the main book. Probably a terrible thing to say, but it's so immersive and it's so gripping, and there is the power in how concise it is.
Yeah. I think that's quite a difference, isn't it? Really, sometimes it feels like it's almost just a chapter long rather than a whole
Yeah,
novel long, and you've
it
packed
definitely feels
everything.
like just a
Yeah,
chapter of like what in the world, and the
yeah.
whole story's there.
The whole thing's in there. Wow. So
Yeah.
let's talk about then. So your second book in the series that you've got, Ruthless Dawn.
Yeah.
So um, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you write a chunk of that during NaNoWriMo? So what's that, the
Yes.
National Novel Writing Month?
Yes. Ruthless Dawn's draft is so convoluted. So I actually started writing it while Awakening Dusk was with my developmental
Okay,
editor.
good. Yeah, good.
And I got about 40,000 words in. And then I got my feedback from my editor, and I realized one of the end plot points didn't work. And it totally like messed up everything I had written
Oh,
for
wow.
book
Okay.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a learning experience. So I had to like start redrafting it after I published Awakening Dusk and pull like what I could pull.
Yeah.
So it was like digging for dinosaur bones in the sand. Sorry, my son. Trying to like put the skeleton together. And then I wasn't making as much progress as I wanted. I definitely think I felt more pressure this time because I have readers and I have people waiting on it, and I maybe let that get in my head a little too much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Different when you're
understand that.
writing to the void and to yourself, and when you're like, oh my gosh, someone's waiting to read this.
How many
And
how many words did you do then during NaNoWriMo that month, November? How many
so
did you do?
I almost made it. I was so close. I wound up having like half of the book written. I think I was sitting at like 74,000 words, 64,000 words.
Okay.
Started NaNoWriMo. I was actually going over the daily word count for a while. I was really getting into it. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was such a moment of growth for me to realize that that was achievable. Like I could do that much because I didn't previously think that I could. And I wound up getting, I think it was 43,000 words down. And then I had like 4 or 5 days left. And that's when I hurt my knee and wound up being on pain meds
Yeah.
and couldn't think clearly to write coherently. So I just had to stop there, unfortunately.
Wow. Did you enjoy it though? That sort of
I did.
dedicated month? Yeah.
I did. I'd actually started a little uh, group conversation with some other writers who had some like end of year goals or who were participating in NaNoWriMo. And we were like messaging each other, and having that accountability and support, I think definitely fed into the success of it.
Yeah. I think that's something that I would benefit from, is that kind of accountability. I think that's why I like, talking to people like yourself and other writers is,
Mm.
when they're doing it, they've got a work in progress, and I'm doing 1,000 words a day. I mean, I mentioned Nick Snape, he writes like 4 or 5,000 words a day. I think, how on
Oh my
earth
goodness.
do you do that?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't know.
wow. But I mean, great. I mean, fantastic. I mean, his stuff is
Mhm.
great. So yeah, it works for him. But so I think sometimes that accountability works really well. Maybe that's something that we at Page Turnerz can figure out
So
at
are
some.
you an extroverted writer? Because I'm like one of those weird extroverted writers, and I feel like the writing process is you're so alone in it that you can feel like you're the only one doing it. And so talking to other people like boosts me and like helps me keep going.
Yeah, I think I am. I mean, it is nice just to kind of unload the story and just unpack
Yeah.
it, really. Yeah, no, I think I am in that respect. I hadn't thought about that before, but yeah, I think I am. I mean, I like to share the story. And I
Hmm.
mean, the trilogy that I'm writing, I know the end. I don't want to tell everybody
Yes.
the end, but
I know the end of mine too. I don't know how we get there, but I know the end, and I am the same way.
yeah,
I just want to spoil it.
yeah, exactly. So I'm sort of biting my tongue not to tell anybody the end of it, because I just want to share it. But yeah, I know. I think I am. I think I do. I like that opportunity to sort of kind of talk about it to really whoever will listen. So,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
um,
Weird comment on anyone.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. People have asked me, when's book two coming out and all that sort of stuff. So that's good. So I'm trying not to spoil that, really, the story of that, because I just want to talk about it. But yeah, no, I
Exactly.
hadn't thought about that before. But yeah, I think I probably am. I
Yeah.
like to kind of
I
get on
have
that.
the cover designed already for book two, but it's too early to release it. And I keep wanting to just show everyone. I relate so much to that.
Yeah, we're actually going through the process of that now as well. My designers come back with some ideas and some designs that are really good, but it's just not quite there. So
Just some tweaks. Yeah.
yeah, we've got that back and forth going on, which is a bit of a pain, but because I want to do the cover reveal and all of that sort of stuff.
Mhm. It's
But
so
yeah,
hard to sit on it when you have the goodies already. You're just like, I want to tell the world.
because there are parts of it, and I look at the book cover and I go, wow, that says it. That's amazing. And then there are other elements I think, oh, that could be tweaked a little, but it's the good bits that you just focus on. So
Mhm.
I'm really looking forward to that. And hopefully in the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, the book cover will be ready and I can
Oh,
reveal it
that'll be
on
exciting.
Instagram and here and and everywhere else and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. So how far along then are you with Ruthless Dawn? How much more have you got to do?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I've really been derailed by the knee injury. So I am about 80% through the first draft. But I
Okay.
say that, and it's really like some of it is the third draft of the first because of like having to rewrite so much and
Sure.
then piece it together. So yeah, I'm still working on the first draft, but I do think I'm further along than that implies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. So do you have an idea then when it'll be published, or have you set a goal for it to be
My
out?
loose goal is 2025, unfortunately.
Okay, no, that's good.
Yeah, I wish
Yeah.
it were sooner.
No, that's all good. And it's nice to have that again as well. And I mean, really, it's been a year since the first of my trilogy come out. So in March,
Mhm.
I released it last year. So it's going to be the same. Again, that wasn't planned. It's just with other things that have been going on. That's just kind
Yeah,
of the way it is. So that's kind of how it's worked out. And I'm happy with that because it means that I haven't rushed it. And it means that
yeah,
the story that I want to write is being written and not
yeah.
forced.
I'm a huge supporter of the quality over quantity. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, I'm a slow reader. I'm a slow writer. It takes a while for the ideas to brew and coalesce into something whole. And sometimes you just have to take the time to do it justice.
No, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. It is good to do it that way because then you're the writer, you're dictating it, although your characters are kind of leading you in the direction that you want to go, which is fine. So one last question then, talking about characters, do you have a
Mm.
favorite that you've written?
Oh, you're so mean. Um, hmm. Obviously, you love the main characters,
Sure.
but I don't want to be cliche, so I think I'll say Bea. Like she's funky and she's off the cuff. You don't know what's going to come out of her mouth. It's not always appropriate. But I mean, the books are for 14 and up, so don't be too concerned. But I don't know.
No,
She's really fun to write.
that's fine. Well, no, that's good because we all have those as well. I have the same. Do you find that they are parts of you or parts of people that you know? I think most of us sort of draw from people in our lives. Would you agree with that?
Um, Kind of. So I definitely see myself in some of the characters, which is ironic because Bea is like not like me at all. I'm a people pleaser. So, but as far as like drawing off of people I know, not very much. I think they kind of just like pop out of the ether into my brain as they are.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
really understand it. I feel like God made me to write and I just have to follow through with it.
Oh, no,
Um,
that's good. It's nice to have that direction, something that
yeah.
somewhere is telling you this is what you need to do. That's good. I think that's great. So let's finish off then.
Okay.
And so where can people buy your books? Where are they available now?
Yeah, so they're available on Amazon. They're both enrolled in Kindle Unlimited. So if you're subscribed, you can read them for free.
Okay.
The paperback of Awakening Dusk is available on like Barnes and Noble and other sites. You just have to order it. And also, I'm a big proponent for getting it into libraries. I've gotten it into multiple libraries in my area, and some of my family have even gotten it into other libraries. My aunt works at a library. So you could always request it at your library or local bookshop and they can order it for you.
Oh, that's fantastic. How did you do that? Because I haven't done that. That's not something I've done. How did you go about that?
So I looked up a bunch of libraries on Google and I looked at their board of directors and their contact us, and I just cold pitched emailed them.
Right.
And honestly, that's how my second book event came to be. I cold pitched a librarian, and the director of that library, she's actually an independent author herself and loves to support her local authors. And so they do an event every year. So that was my first event with like a bunch of other writers there. I only sold 2 books, but I had so much fun and like made some connections. And
Yeah.
actually, one of those authors is in my little group chat for support.
Great. That's good.
Yeah, it was my first time like meeting other authors like out in the wild, and it was a really enjoyable experience.
So people can get your books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Can people contact? Do you have a newsletter, that kind of thing going on?
I don't have an official one yet. That is a goal. Hopefully sometime this year or next I can get that going. I also, my website is a work in progress. So once I get the domain, and then I can get the newsletter in order.
They're always a work in progress. Mine is as well, because
Thank you.
I just write, and I don't have time to do it. But people can contact you on Instagram.
Yeah, my email is open for, the inbox is always open, and you can private message me or whatever. I would love to hear from readers. Honestly, that's one of the most exciting parts of the job.
No, it really is. You're absolutely right. So what I'll do is I'll put links to your websites and all of your social media stuff somewhere underneath, I think, of the video or wherever they will be. They will be available, so people can get in touch with you. So listen, Rachel, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. And,
it's been my honor. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's great. I love doing this. So please let me know the moment your next book comes out.
I definitely will.
Yeah, we'll do something together again.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. Speak to you soon.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turnerz Podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.